A new documentary takes you inside the minds of misfits who unleashed a commercial assault on low Earth orbit. Ashlee Vance explains why he spent years documenting the space race.
All right, I haven't really told the story yet, but here's the full
Great,
story.
this is going to be good.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
You've heard about the billionaire space race.
Shit.
This isn't that movie.
This HBO original documentary, Wild Wild Space, follows these slightly cowboy personalities behind the punishing and once private pursuit to defy the laws of physics. It focuses on a few characters: Astra's Chris Kemp, Planet Labs' Will Marshall, and Rocket Lab's Peter Beck. There's F-bombs.
Let's start a company.
Fierce competition.
I'm gonna crucify him.
Billions of dollars at stake, and more importantly, the shape of our society.
And whoever controls space may very well control the future of humanity.
It's impressive innovation, but enough to unseat even the most optimistic among us. HBO gave me express written consent to use this trailer. The whole documentary was inspired by Ashlee Vance, who spent years following Rocket Lab and Astra behind the scenes. I had a chat to him just after the premiere. This is a bit different to my typical CEO interviews. It's just two business journalists on other ends of the earth bonding over their coverage of space companies. It's good to chat.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
And thank you again for letting me watch an early screening. It was so fun to watch early, and I loved it as much as I thought I would. It was really epic. Good job.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, it was lots of effort. I'm glad to hear that.
Well, that was kind of my first question, right? I mean, talk about the effort you spent. Was it 6 years writing the book and then filming this?
Yeah, I was trying to think. I mean, the first time somebody reminded me last night, we had this premiere in New York City. I make this television show called Hello World for Bloomberg, and it was actually the very first season of shooting the show. I went to see Peter Beck and Rocket Lab in Auckland in 2015, and so I had no idea I was going to do a book or a documentary at that point. But we do have some of the. I mean, we have some archival footage, but otherwise, like the earliest footage that I kind of shot with the camera would have been 2015, and then it was around 2017, 2018 when I really could feel the momentum picking up and definitely knew there was a book there, and started realizing I'd done this biography on Elon Musk, and all these people sort of wanted to be the next SpaceX, the next Elon. So I had really good access. Everybody wanted me to come by, and I realized I had such good access that I should start trying to see if I could sneak cameras in there, because it's like really rare to catch some of these companies at such an early stage, and to be invited, into the mission control and to watch the launches and all that stuff. And so, so anyway, it's at least 6 or 7 years.
Incredible. Well, I was going to ask that anyway. I mean, why not do this on Elon Musk? Why focus on the smaller satellite low Earth orbit players when there are, massive multi-billionaires playing in this game like Elon and formerly Bezos too?
Yeah, for a whole bunch of reasons. I mean, one, I done the biography on Elon, and we
didn't go down so well.
Yeah, I mean, we hadn't always had the smoothest relationship, so he wasn't really. I had some PTSD. I didn't really want to spend more time on him. And then also, there's been kind of a few SpaceX. There's quite a few SpaceX films on Netflix and elsewhere, and then really it's just what I got interested in. I mean, I just could feel all this activity. That same story, like, I'd covered space quite a bit for a while, and I always had rocket people reaching out to me. We've built a rocket, and then you go see it, and it's nothing. And then I started hearing rumors about this guy in New Zealand, and no offense, I was just skeptical. I mean, it's usually something that comes out of like the United States or Russia or someone with a history of doing this stuff. And so the first time I went there, I had very low expectations, and I was shocked. There were 3 rocket bodies on the shop floor, and he clearly knew what he was doing, and everyone was speaking so highly of them. And so I just kind of caught the bug, and I thought it was a really fascinating story. I thought everybody hears about the billionaires all the time. There was just this raw sort of underbelly, underdog energy to the people that I was covering, and so I enjoyed all of that. And then, in fairness, like, I mean, this is hindsight speaking, but like it worked out pretty well as far as like Peter at Rocket Lab is concerned. I mean, people always talk about Branson and Bezos. I mean, Elon, yes, like SpaceX is dominant, but Peter's like the only other game in town. So if you're doing like a space story on Branson or Bezos, I think you're probably in bad shape.
No offense taken that you had kind of had underwhelming thoughts on our country initially. I think most people do. You even said in the documentary about New Zealand, there's like nothing there. when did you first come here? And I hope you've been figured out by the time you left. There was more.
That was specifically about Invercargill.
There's nothing there.
Yeah, I if that came off as the entire country, I feel bad. I was trying to kind of like put Peter's place in the country. When was the first time I came to New Zealand? My mom's Australian, and I've gone to Australia every year of my life for many years. I mean, we had a huge family there, but I never went to New Zealand all those times. I would always be in Sydney just seeing family. And so I really went to New Zealand for the first time for this project. Yeah, 2015 would have been my first visit. And then over the course of doing the book and the film, I think I went, it's got to be like 7 times, I think.
Wow. Over the course of the filming and doing the research for the book. That's a long way to come that many times. You went deep.
I did. I mean, one of my favorite trips, a lot of times I would go see Rocket Lab at their headquarters and things like that. And then I'm a tech journalist. I would go see, I think I've written like quite a lot of stories about New Zealand tech companies for somebody who's not from the country. But when I really was like getting ready to do the book, we spent this amazing month with my family. I tried to like retrace Peter's, childhood more or less. And so I wanted to see everywhere he'd grown up, where he'd gone to school. So we went to the South Island and started at Christchurch and just did this big road trip all the way around the country, and then went in a little bit to Queenstown and then back out and all the way around. And so I went to Dunedin and Invercargill, all these spots that have been part of Peter's life, and then obviously Auckland as well. And so it was a really memorable trip. I mean, that was my family was ready to move there. we would have been a good choice to do that, I think. So but it was one of my favorite things of doing this project, was getting to know the country. I love it.
Oh, I love that. Well, you are welcome back anytime. And on behalf of all of us, thank you for covering our tech companies. Believe it or not, we kind of push above our weight on that front. So it can be impressive.
Really do. And then, just what I've seen the last few years is crazy. I mean, I guess, in large part, thanks to Rocket Lab's success, I'm quite convinced after United States, New Zealand has more aerospace startups than any other country, which is a pretty remarkable feat.
You heard it here first. But that is, I think what is so incredible about this whole documentary, and your book obviously as well, but the access that you got. And these companies we've both filmed inside them. There's a lot of commercial sensitivity on those factory floors, right? Like when you're in there's more you're told that you're not allowed to film than you are allowed to film. So how did you, while you were filming this entire documentary, how did you navigate that to ensure you got enough behind the scenes footage?
It was really tricky, and if I go on too long, just tell me to shut up. But you're totally right. I mean, some of this is very serious legal stuff. There's this United States law, ITAR, which is a restriction around defense-related technologies, and they take it very seriously, even if you accidentally leak some image that's deemed important by the government. I mean, like the person who took the image is going to jail, or possibly, or getting some horrible fine, and so is the company. And so Rocket Lab fell under those same restrictions. I was lucky. Companies like Rocket, some of the companies in the film are just at different stages of their journey, and so Rocket Lab was a little bit trickier. You have to be quite careful about where you put the camera. Astra, as people will see in the film, was both like at a younger stage and also a bit more freewheeling about some of these things than the other companies. And so they let me film everything. I mean, I was in the mission control when the rocket's blowing up and they're trying to tell everyone that it was okay, talking to their investors and things like that. And so, but that's really when I knew I had something special, is because this is every other space story you usually see, unless it's a movie where they can dramatize things. It's a very positive story about everything going right and our best and brightest doing these amazing, courageous things, which is true, but there's a lot of heartache and drama and things going wrong on the way to that point, which you never get to see, because obviously nobody wants to show their worst moment. And so that was kind of my quest, was to show what life was really like. At the end, we did have to have a lawyer look over. It's like almost like nothing to do with the story. It's just, did you show this rocket from this one angle where some overseas adversary could blow it up and figure out how they build their motor? And so you just have a lawyer go over that stuff. And I did make that agreement with the companies. Obviously nothing to do with content or anything like that, but like, let's all not go to jail because of this picture. So that's how we solved it.
Yeah, that would kind of be a bad end, right? I think one of my favorite moments, or a couple of them, were following Chris Kemp around and just how forthcoming he was to you, even kind of playing up to the cameras, right? Like eating the lead paint.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite, which was kind of a very quick moment, was him on the phone to, I'm assuming, his partner, and he said something like, "Baby, this is going to make our lives so much easier." It was like those personal moments. And I found that was quite a contrast to the light that you saw either Will Marshall or Peter Beck in. They were very much at work and wanted to be scientists and engineers. Do you feel like through the content you were able to capture and the access that you got from the different characters, it allowed you to show the entirety of each of them?
Again, the companies were at different stages. Halfway through the movie, all these companies went public, and then all the lawyers show up and have their own thoughts on how you should do these things, which was a pain. If I'm totally honest, Will Marshall, who I adore and have spent all these years writing about, was much more reserved and has a very interesting social life. He lives in a communal house in Silicon Valley and has for many years. They would not let us film there. Will would not. The rest of the house said it was okay, and Will wouldn't. And then, Peter, as long as I've known him, has, I think it's like part Peter and part maybe some Kiwi sensibilities. He's just a bit more reserved, doesn't want to come off as like a show off. And so Peter was great, and Rocket Lab was fantastic during filming. They just were, again, a bit more, he didn't want to show us like his home life. He was concerned about his privacy and things like that. Chris had none of these concerns. So I think I think it's pretty revelatory about their characters. You can tell in the way we structured the film that we had some of this stuff with Chris, that it wasn't just that we weren't getting it from the other people. It's hard to get that from anyone. I mean, it was like a once in a lifetime opportunity where this person was really allowed us to see everything to do with the company and their life and everything like that. So I think you're right, and we just tried to navigate it the best we could. I think you get a pretty good feel for Peter, and I think there's a reason there's sort of like less footage of Planet in the film, and subsequently, after they saw the film, now I'm getting all these notes. They're like, "Oh, I wish we'd participated a lot more than we did," and all that. So I was like, "I told you so."
Oh, that's amazing. I've never written a book, Ashlee. I know you've written many, and I've read them both, love them both. But I can imagine that all of the detail that goes into a book would be, a lot more interesting, and kind of gives you the ability, that kind of platform, to put a lot more detail into it and kind of explain things and people better. And then I know what it's like to create videos, and it is sometimes very hard to create a story arc, a beginning, middle, and an end. It looks easy when somebody watches the final product, but hell, it is so hard. And I can only imagine how much vision and detail you actually did walk away with from these years filming. So when you first went into this process of making this documentary, what were the parts that you were absolute on ensuring that had to be in there? And what were things that you wish could have been, but just didn't fit in the final story?
All right. I haven't really told this story yet, but here's the full story.
Great. This is going to be good.
I mean, when I set out to do this, I was like, I'm going to do a book and a documentary at the same time. I write a lot of articles and have done these other books, and at the end, other people sometimes want to buy your material and turn it into a documentary. And I'd been making my own television show, Hello World, and I was like, you know what? Whatever. I'm going to try to do this. It's going to be hard, but let's see if I can make a film. And I really, it was not a film at the beginning. I wanted to make a series, and so I wanted to do this episodic series. And so really from like 2017 to 2000, so I raised some money from three wonderful people who helped me get on this journey. And so I filmed all over the world. I mean, we filmed there's a lot of footage from much earlier days with Rocket Lab and in New Zealand that's not in the film. I was in Ukraine, I was in French Guiana, I went to India, and Russia, and so I wanted to tell this episodic series where you could see maybe Rocket Lab would be one episode, and it would be sort of like this history of that. I wanted to do the kind of collapse of the Russian space program. The European space program flies out of French Guiana, sort of center it on these sites that are quite exotic and unusual, and tell stories from there. I bit off more than I could chew is what happened. And sort of ran out of money at various points during this exercise, and really was just too big for me. And so I'd gathered these hundreds of hours of footage, then brought on this wonderful team. Ross Kaufman is the Academy Award-winning director of this film. Jay Callahan was the producer. And so they saved me. They went through all the footage, sort of like centered on the stories that they liked the best and felt that we had the strongest footage from, and then we filmed for another couple of years after that to round everything out. So sorry, it's a very long answer, but it was a very long journey.
That's incredible. And I had absolutely no idea that was where it began. I mean, all I'm thinking, Ashlee, is there's so much vision there still to be used. Like, you've got number 2, 3, 4, 5 in the bag, surely.
There's a lot. I mean, the problem was I didn't know what I was doing, and I stretched myself too thin. And so some of these stories went pretty deep. Like Astra was right in my backyard. It was easy for me to go there every week, twice a week for a long period of time. Things like Ukraine, we got amazing footage. I was the first Western journalist, I think probably still the only, who ever went into the old Soviet ICBM factory in Dnipro with a camera. I went to these hidden rocket test sites in the forest with a camera, but we just didn't have enough. As the money started running out, I was getting spread too thin. And so yes, I'm still kind of like wondering what to do with that footage. We filmed with this company, Spin Launch, that's making a space catapult, which sounds insane, but they want to throw rockets to the edge of space. And
what?
Yeah. And
like so an Olympic athlete throws it.
Yeah, so they built this huge centrifuge, and it spins at this incredible speed, and then you throw the rocket to the edge of space. So they sort of use the centrifuge to get over the gravity part that requires so much fuel, and then the rocket just lights up at the very end. But I filmed with them when they were like 12 people in a secret room in Silicon Valley and all this stuff. So anyway, I'll have to like figure out something to do with all this one day. But I just have to get this one done first.
And can you please at least just make us a promise that we will see it someday, because that just sounds incredible.
No, I fully intend to. And then, some of this will just be great because I did film with a number of subjects, and you kind of get to see who's made it and who hasn't, and then go back and I'll have some good early days stuff, hopefully on some success stories here.
But as you know, this industry that we cover moves so quickly, and you were covering it for years. How did you know at the point to stop? I mean, even as you say, they went public at some point. It almost felt like that may have been a natural point to stop, but you kept filming for years after that. How did you know when to kind of tie it all together, and how did you ensure that it was still relevant when it was released? Because new things happen all the time.
Yeah, no would be a strong word.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. There were these big moments. I mean, you're trying to find like Rocket Lab was sort of no problem because they had reached this level of success where I felt pretty confident, but once we'd been at it for a while, I felt quite confident that they were going to be around. They were going to be doing interesting things. They were okay. Planet was quite similar. They had built this giant constellation of satellites. We're making money. We're doing okay. Some of these other rocket companies, that's, I was filming with a bunch of them, and then you try to find the best character from the story, and then you're kind of waiting for for some points where you could put a flag in the sand. Astra was problematic. COVID came along, that slowed a lot of things. The original idea was to sort of, Astra's whole goal was to build a rocket faster than anybody ever had and launch it. And if that had gone swimmingly well, then you would have that moment, and maybe that's it, you've done it, and for their story. But that didn't happen. It took many years, and then even after the rocket had succeeded, it started to fail. And so you have to pick these spots. And Astra, just this morning, they had basically gone bankrupt and now took the company private, and that just happened today. We kind of had a sense this was coming, and so it's one of the final notes in the movie. But it was hard. Anyway, I don't have a good answer, because you have to pick a moment. I mean, the story's not going to end, and so maybe there will be wilder space coming. I don't know, but I felt like we did get to some spots where you clearly had seen the trajectory of Rocket Lab and Astra and Planet, and there was enough to kind of give people a feel for why they're important and interesting.
Certainly one of the most interesting parts was the fragility of Astra, trying to sell the idea to investors and to even call them after things went wrong. I mean, that was such incredible insight. What did that show you about the fragility of this industry? Obviously, you would have known about that anyway, having covering it. But Is there anything that it showed you that even surprised you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for people who don't know, it's like the most, as far as like building a product for a company goes, it's the most binary sort of thing. The whole world gets to see, like, did you do a good job or a bad job? Are you going to survive or not? I mean, either it gets to space, it does what it's supposed to do, or usually it blows up. And so this is not like some movie you're putting out, or a product, or a new kind of food where you have some months or years to see if people like it. So yes, I mean, it's this very visceral, brutal business, and so seeing that up close was dramatic. Yeah.
I think it's why it made for such a good movie.
Yeah, and you usually, usually don't get to see this other side of it. And so yeah, no, I mean, it's one of the parts I like. The other part that's crazy is, for the entire history of the space industry as it was governments doing these things. And so to the point that, like, you would have a rocket blow up, it was sort of a blow to your national pride. But if the government wanted to keep funding the program, they were going to keep funding the program. Even when we got to the very earliest days of commercial space, even still today, SpaceX is massive, but they're a private company, and they're a private company for a reason, which is, you don't necessarily want the average Joe investor, retail investors who don't kind of understand the complexities of this industry, maybe judging you on each launch, because when a rocket blows up, it looks really bad, but there is method to the madness. I mean, SpaceX has proven out that you can blow a lot of these up and learn from them, and just try to move quick, which is what Astra was hoping to emulate. Is you don't treat this thing so precious, you don't waste all this time, you build it, you learn from it, and sort of get to the end goal faster. That way, all these companies, like we mentioned, went public in the middle of this because they were chasing this free money that was available during the SPAC phase. And I just thought it was like a Faustian bargain. Like, yes, you're getting the money, but now you have all these retail investors sitting there, and every time you launch, your stock price is going up and down 40-50%. And so it was a different, watching that. We get into that in the film. I just don't know if people who are not in the space industry will understand what a different era that is.
I do definitely want to talk to you about the sort of grips of governments that these companies don't operate in, because I thought that was really interesting. But you mentioned SpaceX there, which is very clearly the dominant player. I think we all know that. What do you think, from doing the research for years and getting to know all of these companies and sort of the people and leaders behind them, what do you think it takes to win in the space race?
It's really fascinating. It's like, why? So SpaceX and Blue Origin started almost the exact same year, and Jeff Bezos had way more money than Elon did when the companies started. Jeff backs Blue Origin. Both companies were undoubtedly filled with very smart, ambitious people. SpaceX has launched, I think, over 400 rockets, has 4 rocket families, is the world's leading satellite manufacturer, has put people into space. Blue Origin has never flown a single satellite into orbit yet, and is here more than 20 years later hoping to do it for the first time. So like, why does that happen? I mean, that's very dramatic difference. Rocket Lab started at almost the same time as a lot of American rocket companies, had a little bit less money than a lot of them, had no, most of its employees, because of these ITAR restrictions, had never worked on an actual rocket, where some of these other companies had SpaceX veterans working for them, had veterans from Boeing, Lockheed Martin, who had done this before, and Rocket Lab beat them all and continues to beat them all. I mean, it's a fascinating question. The best thing I have come to is that I was surprised. I think I underestimated the effect that CEOs, the very top leadership, seems to have on the culture of the company. In my head, I always pictured that an organization that got to any sort of size, the CEO is something of like a cheerleader, like I don't know, out telling the company story, doing these things. But there's to me now, there's clearly something there where their character appears to sort of like ripple down through the company. That's the only other way I can explain it. Honestly, Rocket Lab is like an inexplicable story. If you were to place all 10 of these companies that started at a similar time and imagine that Rocket Lab was the one that rose out, nobody really would have taken that bet, I think, except for Peter Beck and his friends.
Well, without giving too much away, that's kind of the point that you conclude the film on, right? That it's Elon Musk and Peter Beck, and you say it with almost surprise at the end, which it's almost like that's not the conclusion that you expected to find out when you began this whole process.
I don't think anyone would. And I think I mean, I've covered this more than most people have. And I think definitely the average person does not realize this at all. They usually kind of like just think it's Elon, and then they always think it's like, they're like, oh, but Jeff Bezos has a rocket company. I'm like, it hasn't flown, a rocket. They've done some tourist stuff, but yeah, to me, that is it. That's it. It's a brutal business. It's very hard. There's almost no room for failure, and so both those companies now have a huge lead over everybody else. I think Blue Origin will finally be a competitor because they have so much money and now apparently, are getting close on this big rocket. And so maybe we'll have 3, and there are some new rocket startups that are coming. So we'll see how this all shakes out. But it's a daunting lead. We probably do not need a world with like 8 rocket companies. We probably need a world with 2 and maybe 3.
On governments and organizations, I think NASA was painted in quite an interesting light. I can't remember who said it in the film, but someone says that it's almost like just a bureaucratic organization that's licking at some ice cream cone.
Oh, the self-licking ice cream cone. That's how it stays alive. Yeah.
That was so great. That was such an incredible comment. But then you also kind of contrast that with the only real success, which actually bred a lot of these ideas and these dreams and these entrepreneurs, was this kind of freewheeling Silicon Valley startup within NASA. So can you talk me through your approach and perhaps even how careful you kind of had to be or not in the way that you painted NASA?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to tell the truth and I was careful, but I wasn't trying to massage the situation or anything. I think NASA, look, it's a fantastic organization with this incredible track record. In many, 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 many ways, it's seen better days. And it's still doing things I just think it has no business doing, like building rockets. I think it should be focusing more on missions that are deep into the solar system, science that other people are not going to fund, really use their expertise for that. To your point, well, the guy who made the quote about the self-licking ice cream cone was this Brigadier General Pete Worden, who ended up in charge of this Silicon Valley NASA Center, NASA Ames. And, he's a one of a kind. He's an iconoclast. He's working in a bureaucratic organization, but hates to be doing that and is trying to reshape it. And so he brought all these young people in. And so, yes, those young people ended up creating some of these satellite and rocket companies. And NASA helped in that, they had resources, but this did not happen at other NASA centers. This sort of happened because Pete Worden set it up for success. And so, I don't sit Pete's left NASA Ames, and it's kind of gone back to its regular scheduled program. And I think it's a big question for the United States. It's a strange organization. It's a great organization. Its funding is so tied up with the government and the whims of senators who have jobs in their states that there is no sort of pure motivation to pursue space and do it cost effectively.
And what your doco really shows is that it doesn't be necessary anymore, right? Because there are these private operators that are doing it and don't need bureaucrats, and they actually now have the government in a way in their hands, because all of those three companies, Planet Labs, Astra, and Rocket Lab, all have military contracts. In the doco, you call it this grand regime change. I wonder how, and it kind of leaves you feeling quite uncomfortable. And I wonder if that was the aim of kind of how you wanted the viewer to feel, because I think even us having to do our jobs, we have to really be optimists, but
yeah,
it even makes, unseats the most optimistic among us, really.
Yeah, I mean, I still am pretty optimistic about all this stuff, and mostly come at it from that light. There's things where I have no problem with companies doing this. I mean, if you look at the cost of a SpaceX rocket or a Rocket Lab rocket versus what NASA or the military contractors produce, to me, that is just a no-brainer. I mean, they're full of it's just, I think it's borderline criminal the way they go about the spending on these things, and I think the companies have shown just how bad they are. So that part is fine. This next question of like, space is this shared good, should companies even be like divvying up this real estate up there, putting their satellites in? I think it's obviously inevitable. I think they're providing valuable services. I think the government's moved very slowly on all this and aren't always the best decision makers. And so, but I mean, the point of the movie is less to kind of like judge a lot of this stuff and more to like make people very aware that space has become a business. I think we still have this misconception of like the space race days, that this is fully a nationalized pursuit about science and prestige and the good of humankind for exploring the universe and everything. I mean, there's a bit of that, but like, it's a business. and that was the point, is that all these movies you've seen for all these decades are nice and all, but it's different now. And so, what I was shocked by is that people don't talk about this very much, because really these decisions are being made by the companies. And so far, I actually think it's working out okay, but people make mistakes. There's bad actors that come along, and I don't think the public is really aware of what's happening at all, or asking any of this. And if you look at the historical analogs, things like social networking, a lot of that stuff got so far before anybody even began wondering if it was a good idea. It seemed like this was a topic worth covering.
You don't think we're too far gone?
Not really. I mean, definitely, I think this shift has happened, but I think it was inevitable. And I think the governments were doing the government space programs had become so lazy and slow and sad and bureaucratic that I think fresh blood was good here. I think the ship has sailed on whether this is going to be like a commercial enterprise. Yes. Do I think it's going to be like filled with horrible things as a result? Not really. My biggest concern, honestly, is Russia. I think people don't pay enough attention to this. Russia, their space program is so tied up in their national identity. It's a very proud nation. Their space program is collapsing. SpaceX has undercut them for all the commercial missions. The war in Ukraine has cut off a ton of customers. Their program is rife with corruption. And so I see them as like a wild card who they have no commercial space startups at all. So they're not really going to participate in this new era. And so, what happens to something like that? We've already seen they shot one of their own satellites down with a missile from the ground just to let everyone know they can do that. So, that doesn't, it's something like that really that worries me is just like a irrational actor.
I think that right there is the next Ashlee Vance and Ross Kaufman HBO original doco on space. And you can call it Wilder Space. And then the next one, Wildest Space. I look forward to it.
I like that. All right. You're my agent. I need you to
I'm clipping commission off that just right away if that ever happens. It was so good to chat to you. And, it is rare to kind of find a space nerd who goes quite deep on this stuff. So I loved it. And yeah, again, thank you so much for sharing all of your work with us. We're very lucky to see it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for letting me visit your country so much, and thanks for the time.
Next time you're back, I'll show you around just so that you really don't think there isn't much here.
Don't say that. It's not true. Thank you, though. Thank you. I'd like that.
Thank you, Ashlee. So good to meet you.
Hello, Kemp.
Thanks for watching Markets with Madison. If you enjoyed this interview, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. I do all of the research for these episodes myself, so your support means a lot. I always love to hear your feedback and ideas, so please drop any thoughts in the comments below. Now go put your money to work.